Hello, second graders. Still beach day. Paper towel. It's kind of cool for beaches though. All right, yesterday we talked about immigration, right? Immigration, and what is an immigrant? Do you remember what an immigrant was? An immigrant is a person that comes here from another country, right? That's an immigrant. Okay. Or not necessarily here, but goes from one place to another that's not their home. Okay, that would be an immigrant. Okay. What were some of the push factors? You remember what a push factor was? A push factor might be wherever you're living, there are things going on that might make you want to leave. They're not pushing you out, but you're considering leaving because of there's things that are going on, things like war. What are some other things we talked about that I mentioned? Disasters like flooding, drought where you might not have enough food. All those things could be push factors. And what's a pull factor? Okay, a pull factor, so we have immigrant, push factor, and pull factor is things somewhere else that might be better. So why might people come to the United States? Well, because there's food here. You might be able to find a job here. Why do people come to Montana? Well, we have snow, which maybe people like skiing, so that would be a pull factor if you really like skiing. Why would somebody go someplace like, I don't know, California or Arizona or Texas? It's warm. Those are pull factors, okay? So we talked a little bit about push factors, pull factors, and what is the motto of the United States of America? Do you remember that? E pluribus unum. And what does that mean? Out of many, one. Right? Okay. So that's a little bit review. Today, we're going to read about at least one person, maybe we'll touch on a couple of people who were immigrants that came to the United States and had talents. They had things that, people embraced here, that they did good to help other people in the United States. Okay? And some of the words we're going to run across are right here. The word center. Okay? So you've heard the word center before, and a lot of us think of a center as in the middle of something, right? The center of the classroom, the center of the school. A center is also a place. In Red Lodge, they have the Clay Center. What? The Clay Center? Our school did a field trip there last year. But it's a place where you can go and do things with clay. You can buy clay stuff like pottery and that sort of stuff that's made out of clay. So there's the Clay Center. It's like a place that you go to do a certain activity. Okay? Another word we're going to run across today is this one. Can you see that? Can you sound it out? Chunk it out? Interpreter. So an interpreter is somebody who helps you speak to somebody else who might speak a different language. I'll say a phrase in Spanish, and then I'll pretend I'm an interpreter, and I'll interpret what I just said. Okay, here we go. ¿Puedo al baño, por favor? What? I said, ¿Puedo al baño, por favor? An interpreter would say, Mr. Frank just said, may I go to the bathroom, please? Okay, so an interpreter is somebody who interprets a different language. Okay, that is an interpreter. All right, liberty. So liberty is like freedom, right? The people in England, originally when they came to the United States, they wanted to get freedom or liberty to practice their own religion or get away from the rule of the king of England. Okay, so that's liberty. And opportunity is kind of a chance, right? You might have an opportunity to go skiing 3 times this year. or we all had the opportunity to go skiing 3 times. That's what opportunity means. It's a chance to do something. Okay? So I'm going to move us on over here for our reading today. I'm going to turn off the beach sounds because they're kind of noisy. All right. Although I only get to go to the beach about probably every other year I go to a beach somewhere. All right. So for our read aloud today, if you noticed, if you'd like to draw, they're kind of boring, but what are these? Something, especially this one you can kind of tell. They're lights, right? Street lights. Lights that you'd see out on a street in a city. We don't have a lot of street lights in Roberts unless people have them in front of their house, but not like a whole neighborhood having street lights. Okay? So you can color your street lights, have some fun with them. You can add some stuff to it. You can draw a moon in there or something, since we use, street lights mostly at night is when we can see them. So we have some street lights. And today we are going to read about Charles Steinmetz. Charles Steinmetz. And he was an immigrant that came to this country, and we'll just read it. You'll learn a little bit about him. So in this picture, though, we see if you can see it, the Statue of Liberty. Right? This is a copper statue. She was a gift from the people of France to the United States. The word liberty is in her name. It means freedom. And it was one of the main reasons immigrants came to the United States and still do. Okay? So I'm going to read. People are on a boat. They're obviously floating in the water. Look, there she is. With cries of excitement, the ship's passengers rushed to the railing. It was the summer of 1889. When this ship of European immigrants made its way into New York Harbor. In the distance stood the sight they had dreamed of seeing, the Statue of Liberty, a symbol of freedom and hope, welcoming them to their new home in the United States of America. There were many push and pull factors that led many people to come to America. Some wanted to own their own farms or businesses and knew that there was a greater chance of doing that in America than their old countries. Others came from poor places where finding food or shelter had been a desperate daily struggle. They hoped that if they worked hard in this new place and their families could be sure of warm meals and a suitable place to take a shelter and call home. So what did newcomers coming to America hope for? They wanted to find warm homes. They wanted food. They wanted opportunities to work or open businesses where it wasn't really possible in their other countries where they came from. Among the passengers was a man from Germany who, although as an adult stood only 4 feet tall, and whose body, instead of growing straight, seemed to bend to one side. So 4 feet tall, not very tall. I'm not quite 6 feet tall, so 4 feet tall. Probably be about this tall. So not very tall. And he kind of leaned to one side. Let me bring this a little closer. There we go. His name was Charles Steinmetz, and he was a mathematician or expert in mathematics, and an engineer, a person trained to design and build machines, bridges, or buildings. He had left his home in Germany for a very good reason. Listen carefully to find out the push and pull factors that led Charles to America. Charles had written an article that said his nation's government was to blame for many problems. In many countries, writing such an article could land a person in trouble. One day, a friend warned Charles, "My brother, who works for the government, says that the police are going to arrest you and put you in jail. Do you think Charles should be sent to jail for writing an article that he thought about his nation's government? Okay, let me say that again. Do you think he should have been put in jail because he wrote an article in the paper that said his opinion about the government doing things that he didn't agree with? Okay. In the United States, does everybody say great things about our president? Okay. Some people do, and some people do not. Okay. In some foreign countries, if you said bad things about the leader of your country, you could be put in jail. It's not like that in the United States, obviously. That's why people say so many negative things, and some people say really nice things. So, but in some countries, it's not like that. To avoid being sent to jail, Charles fled over the Alps, a large mountain range in Europe, to Switzerland. There, a friend of his named Oscar gave him a place to stay. Over dinner one night, Oscar said, "I am moving to America, Charles. Come with me. There you can find work and be free to write and say whatever you think." So being able to find work and being able to write and say whatever you want are pull factors for him. Okay? "If only I could," Charles sighed. "I cannot afford to buy a ticket." Oscar smiled. "My uncle moved to America and made a fortune. He is paying for my ticket. I wrote him, and he's offered to pay for yours too." Now, less than 2 months later, Charles and Oscar, along with many other European immigrants, were sailing into New York Harbor on the east coast of the United States. Okay, 2 months may have seemed like a long time to travel there, but some of those trips took even longer, even up to 6 months. That's half a year. Charles was too short to see over the heads of the other passengers, but Oscar cleared a path for him through the crowd. A minute later, the two friends stood at the railing, staring up at the statue whose lamp lit the way toward the new homeland. The lamp. What statue did they see holding up a lamp? She's holding a lamp, the Statue of Liberty. Beyond the Statue of Liberty, on its island in New York Harbor, was another island called Ellis Island. There were enormous buildings and docks on this island where ships could anchor and unload passengers. Charles thought that Ellis Island, that is where the American government decides who gets to enter the country and who might be turned away. I know that a few people are turned away, those who are dangerous, sick, or do not have papers saying they can move to a new country. Will they let me in after my trouble back home? He wondered. I could find a picture of Ellis Island. So here's a picture of Ellis Island. And this is probably where they would go in and check in to see if they could be allowed into our country, into the United States of America. Charles thought, oh, here we go. I'm getting ahead of myself. Here we go. Hours later, Charles stood in a huge room in a building called the Immigration Center. Okay, the Immigration Center. Probably this building right here, the Immigration Center. Long lines of immigrants waited to approach a row of desks. This is where the government clerks would ask questions to determine whether the travelers could be allowed to enter the United States. And in another part of the building, doctors waited to examine the immigrants. Most people were allowed in. But Charles worried, what will they do if they turn me away? I cannot return home. If I do, I'll be sent to jail. Finally, he reached the head of the line. A government clerk asked him a question, but Charles did not understand English. The clerk called over an interpreter who knew many languages, including German, using the interpreter to turn his English words into German. The clerk asked, "What is your name?" Charles said his name, and the clerk wrote it in a book. Then, without looking up, he asked, "Do you have a job here waiting for you?" "No," Charles answered. "Do you have any money to live on until you find a job?" "No," Charles admitted, telling the truth. Now the clerk looked up at Charles and shook his head. "So you have no money, no job, and you speak no English. I'm sorry, but we want people who can add something to our nation." Just then, Charles' friend Oscar stepped forward. "If you turn this man away," he said, "you will be making the greatest mistake of your life." This is Charles Steinmetz, one of the greatest scientific and mathematical thinkers in the world. He may only be 4 feet tall, but he has many talents. You want citizens who can improve this country? He can. I'm sure of it. That I will pay all his expenses until he has a job. Okay, here's an actual photograph of him. Okay, it's in black and white because they didn't have color photographs back then. But it's a real picture. I mean, it's a real picture of a picture. 2 hours later, Oscar's uncle welcomed Oscar and Charles to his big house in New York City. Soon afterward, Charles Steinmetz began to learn English and went to work at a large company. Using his powerful mind to invent useful new products, he helped improve the way electricity is carried through wires. So he didn't invent electricity or discover electricity, but he invented ways for it to travel through wires more efficiently. Okay? He helped to make electric street lights possible and worked with the famous American inventor Thomas Edison. Charles wrote books that helped other scientists understand electricity. He made more than 200 scientific discoveries. These discoveries made Charles Steinmetz famous and earned him a great deal of money. But he never forgot how other people had helped him. While continuing his scientific work, Charles began teaching at a college near New York City. He refused to take any pay for his teaching, saying, "Teaching others how to create useful inventions is the best way to repay the United States for taking me in." So why do you think he refused or he wouldn't accept money for teaching? He said, "Teaching others how to create useful inventions is the best way to repay the United States for letting me in." So he wanted to repay the United States back for letting him just come into the country. His friend Oscar understood. He explained in later years, like so many others, Steinmetz came to America so he could help others with his talents and also have a good job and life for himself. That is why they call the United States the land of opportunity. Like many other immigrants, the move to America gave Charles a new chance to achieve something. Oscar continued, "I believe that each person brings something good to share. Putting all our talents together can make the United States and its citizens stronger and happier." But just think, that clerk at Ellis Island almost turned Charles Steinmetz away. Charles Steinmetz and his friend Oscar were 2 of the 23 million immigrants who came to the United States between the years of 1880 and 1920. The majority of these immigrants were from the European continent. Like Charles, these European immigrants sailed into New York Harbor and were registered into the United States at Ellis Island. Sometimes immigrants' names were recorded and changed or shortened to make it easier to say, and sometimes, as almost happened to Charles, immigrants were turned away if they were too sick or did not have the right papers. Can you imagine what your life would be like today if Charles Steinmetz had been sent back to Germany? Not sure. Would we have lights the way we have lights? Street lights and lights out in front of our homes and that sort of thing? Okay, so in today's read aloud, I want to review a little bit. We heard about some of the push factors. What was the push factor for Charles? Why did he want to come to the United States? What was the push factor? Think about that. He was afraid he was going to go to jail. That was a big push factor. And it's not really because he did anything really terrible. He just wrote things about how he felt about the leaders of his country. People do that in our country all the time. And they're even on the news. Another question. Where did Charles' ship dock? What was the name of that island in New York Harbor? Do you remember? Starts with an E. Ellis Island. Okay? Ellis Island. And when he was at Ellis Island, there was a clerk, a man in the big immigration center who almost didn't let him come into the country. Okay? Why did he not let him come in? Do you remember? There was a couple reasons. He couldn't speak English. He had no money. And he had no job. But he came in and made a difference, a huge difference. And Charles' friend Oscar called the United States the land of opportunity. Why would that be opportunity? Remember what opportunity meant? Kind of a chance, right? The United States would be the land of opportunity, a place where you have a chance to make a difference, not only in their own lives, but make everybody else's better as well. So I hope you enjoyed our read aloud. And I hope you created some beautiful lights. And here's another kind of a piece of our puzzle. Okay, you can color it whatever you want, but okay, this is land. That looks like a water there. But I want you to write another sentence about what you learned about immigration again. Tell me something else about immigration based on what we learned today. Or write anything that you learned about, that you thought about or learned about in our reading today. Put that right there. And send it over to me. I'd like to see it. So that's it for our read aloud. I hope you're all well. Keep your hands clean. Make sure to give mom and dad lots of hugs and brothers and sisters if you have them. And help out with chores around the house. Since you're home, you might as well do that. I made my son mop the kitchen yesterday and clean the bathrooms. So I didn't have to. Anyway, hope you're all well. And we'll do some handwriting up next. Bye.